The best thing about learning how to do woodworking is that you get the chance to make something really unique every time you start a project. So that's what I tried to do with this black inlaid oak dining table, and I'll try to step through how I did it. It is really important to have state-of-the-art design technology, so if you don't have that, I probably wouldn't even start woodworking, to be honest. But if you've got pencil and paper, that's a pretty good consolation. So yeah, nothing more than pen and paper for the general design, how I wanted it to look. I discovered that the base shape is called a frustum, and I used ChatGPT actually to get the right calculation for how long the sides have to be for a total height of 72 centimeters. So that was pretty interesting. This stuff is called burl, and it's the centerpiece of the table, and it's really beautiful, and I hardly filmed my process for how I set it up, but I basically just glued it onto a substrate of plywood. I stained the plywood black first so that I could fill in any gaps with a black wood filler, and it turned out really nicely. That's the first thing I did in the whole process. So this is what wood looks like after it's a tree, before it's a table. And when you get rough sawn timber, it does not come straight and it doesn't come smooth. So you have to do a lot of work to get it ready to actually turn into a joint or glue together. You have to plane the surface of both sides of the board, which is what I'm doing here. Do that for every board, get it to a reasonable thickness and make sure it's the same thickness throughout the whole length, which takes a while and causes so much wood dust. It's just like mountains of sawdust on the ground after this process. The hardest part about preparing timber is probably getting the edges straight. So as you can see, it comes rough. That's why it's called rough sawn, but it means it's not straight. It kind of goes with whatever the angle the tree was growing at. So you have to figure out a way of cutting a really long line perfectly straight so that you can glue the boards together for the tabletop. So here I'm using a straight edge, which is just a piece of metal that comes perfectly straight, and it's about 2 meters long, which is longer than the wood. And I put my track saw along that straight edge just to ensure that at least one side is perfectly straight. Then I put the straight edge along my table saw, and I've only got a little table saw, so that really helps keeping it level whilst pushing it through. And it also ensures that both sides are parallel to each other and both sides are perfectly straight. It's really important to have straight edges because when you dry fit them together like this, you'll see little gaps, and when you try to glue it up, it's just not going to work as well because the surfaces aren't touching each other. Our sheep, ever judging my techniques. I only recently got this biscuit joiner. I got the DeWalt biscuit joiner because I was having trouble gluing up panels and keeping them perfectly straight. Like I always found myself sanding a lot along the seams or trying to plane them. But this biscuit joiner worked really well in just keeping those seams smooth. I was tossing up between this and the domino, but I just couldn't justify the domino's price tag. It's like $2,000 Australian versus I think this DeWalt biscuit joiner was $300 Australian. So if you're just trying to glue up panels, really recommend just doing biscuit joiner. That said, down the track I might not be able to use the biscuit joiner for stronger joinery techniques, but just for these glue ups it was super handy. It saved me a lot of time when preparing the surfaces. This thing was freaking heavy. I go to the gym quite a bit, which is pretty hard to tell, I know, but I really struggled to pick this thing up. There's always one thing that goes wrong in every build, isn't there? And for those experts out there, you can probably see where my problem is about to come in. Yes, that's right. I scared my dog Gino, and I really hate causing my dogs unnecessary frights. Not only that though, you saw how big the piece of wood that I was chopping off was, and there was no support to stop it from doing this. It was a massive bit of tear out, but luckily I've seen enough Blacktail Studio videos to know that's not the end of the world. I actually uploaded a YouTube short of me fixing this, and someone in the comments reminded me that you can just cut off the piece that was torn out and glue that back on, and it's usually a perfect fit. I completely forgot that. I'd done it before, but yeah, just didn't cross my mind. And I think I thought that this was a good kind of learning opportunity or good video opportunity or something. So I just did it the long way, found an offcut of oak that I had lying around, which looked pretty similar in terms of grain, routed out the tear out and glued in that offcut. The next step is just to remove any waste that's overhanging your tabletop. And I used a router on a little MDF template thing, which allowed me to hover over the waste and just hog out most of that waste. Obviously, I need some damn dust extraction, don't I? I'm a terrible professional when it comes to dust. I usually do most of my big stuff outside the workshop so that I can just let the dust float away. This one turned out pretty good. I was really happy with the result, blended in nicely, and since I'm gonna dye this black, I'm pretty sure you can't even see it in the final result. So yeah, was really happy with that. All right, so these are my 4 panels which are gonna make up the frustum base. And if you remember back to my high-tech picture at the start, this one requires a little bit of math. I think my hand's in the way here, but the first thing to cut is the bottom angle and the top angle, which is 10 degrees. So the sides are coming in at 10 degrees. So you set the table saw to 10 degrees and run it through the top and the bottom. So they're still square, they're not triangles yet. They're square, you're just setting the angle at which the sides will come inward. Most important thing here is to just remember to cut the angles the same way on both sides, so that you want it, when it's leaning in, you want the bottom edge flat to the ground and the top edge parallel to the ground. I had this little miniature out of plywood with me pretty much every step of the way on this base build, just to remind me of the angles, make sure I don't cut anything without remembering the angles that I'm using. All right, it starts to get a little confusing and mathy now, but my panel's being 60 centimeters wide and ChatGPT telling me that the top has to be 34.6 centimeters wide to give me the height that I wanted. I measured 12.7 centimeters inwards on either side and cut using the track saw at an angle. There are 2 angles that you're seeing me cut here. The first one is the long one using the track, the actual length of the track. And that is slightly under 10 degrees. The second angle is the actual angle of the blade of the track saw as it goes along the wood. And that is not 45 degrees. Even though there's 4 sides, if it was a box, it would be 45, but because of the angle of the frustum, it's a bit different. So it's slightly under 45 degrees. There's this fantastic video by Matthias Wandel on YouTube, which I'll put in the link to this video, telling you all about how to cut mitered frustums with multiple sides, more than 4. It has all the right angles for it, and it's super interesting. When it came to the glue up, I was pretty lost. I experimented with kind of like temporarily gluing offcuts onto each corner so that I could clamp it together. It just didn't work, and I ended up just using the weight of each side to let it come together, which really was fine. Like, I strapped it all together, and I think the weight of the wood actually was the best thing for that glue up. At the end of the year, the house with the most... This is probably the scariest part of the build, cutting directly into the top face of this tabletop. Didn't have a template or anything to hog out most of the waste. You saw me marking the edge with a knife. That was for the final part where I kind of chisel the edges to make it look clean. But yeah, when you're routing close to that edge, it's a bit touch and go. But yeah, patience pays off. And this was just the dry fit. I actually drilled a hole underneath the tabletop, which no one will ever see because it's going to be on top of the frosting base, so that I could make sure I get that inlay out. All right, support. I had these design ideas for the maple support beams to contrast the black oak, which, you know, I always thought was going to look pretty good, but I didn't really know how I was going to set them into the base because you can't exactly cut a half lap into the support beams because how is it going to go down onto the base? Or like, would I slide it over one side of the base? Just because of that angle, it was too hard. So I didn't end up cutting anything into the support beams. I only used my track saw and chisels, obviously, to clean it up, to cut the full depth of the support beams. And you'll see how I'm going to join them into the base later. What I'm doing here is cutting more support for the base. Even though I was happy with the glue up on the edges of each panel, these two squares just add a little bit more support. So I cut each side at 10 degrees again so that it would fit into the base. And I did that twice, one smaller, which you see there, and another bigger one, which is closer to the bottom edge. Glue and screws. You'll never see this stuff again, so I wasn't too disappointed with how ugly it looks now. But this just added an extra bit of support to the base, and I'm 100% certain this thing will never ever fall apart now.
Voice above him. Dead, crying. Everything around him seemed to be spinning. So everything was so unwise. You'll get back to...
So dry fit looking pretty schmick. This gave me an idea. I thought maybe next time I'll make a natural timber version of this. This is just American red oak. So I think in white oak it would look really, really nice. As you can see, I'm using Rubio Pre-Color Easy first to stain this thing. Pre-Color Easy, as I found out, is not a protection. It's merely a coloring item. You don't use it as a finishing product. It comes on really nicely. It's super easy to use. I was just using paper towels to apply this. But offers no protection. It's just like a water-based thing. This is my first time using it. I just did a lot of research on it beforehand just to make sure I was doing the right thing. So this Pre-Color Easy version, I guess, is intense black. And it's coupled with the Rubio Monocoat finish, which is charcoal. And that's just the oil plus 2C, which they all come in colors. So I used the charcoal version with this Pre-Color Easy. Before I stain the top, I actually just added a little edge profile here, just a slight chamfer on the top, and I think I did a slightly deeper chamfer on the bottom edge. But yeah, just made sure I did all the finishing touches before I started applying finish. These maple support beams, obviously I did not dye black. I was actually using Osmo Pollux oil. I find this stuff really easy to use. You only put on a light coat and then a really light second coat as well. last forever because you only use such a little amount of it. And it has a slight sheen as well, so it really contrasts nicely with the black oak. I hope you enjoyed the dulcet tones of Stephen Fry at 1.5 times speed there. Yeah, applying this Rubio Monocoat Oil Plus 2C is super easy. I've used the normal uncolored stuff before. Also really easy. I've got to say that this stuff took a long time to dry though. If you're going to use a ceramic or like use the tabletop at all, I would wait about 2 weeks before doing anything to the tabletop after using the black Rubio Monocoat, because it just took a long time for me to be able to run a paper towel over it and have nothing come off. With this inlay, I knew that I wouldn't be able to set it first, make sure it's flush, and then finish the whole tabletop, because obviously I didn't want this to be colored black. And I've tried to do this with inlays before where I've stained the rest of the tabletop and the inlay is not stained. And it's hard work, so you've just got to make sure that the depth of the inlay is exactly right. Finish the inlay off the tabletop and then hammer it home, glue it in after it's all been finished. I do kind of hate using non-traditional joinery methods, but this was just too hard to get a perfect half lap or something for the support beams in the base. You're never going to see inside this area, so I was pretty happy just using right angle brackets to keep the support beams in place. As I mentioned before, I finished the inlay, that little rectangle burl thing, separate from the tabletop, because with most inlays you can kind of glue it in and then shave it down or sand it down to make sure it's flush. But with this, I couldn't do that because I would risk tearing up the black, or if I was going to stain it all like at the same time, I would risk staining the inlay black. So I just had to make sure that the depth of this inlay setting was perfect so that it was flush with the tabletop. And that's why I made sure I had a hole at the bottom so that I could push it in and push it out just to test the depth. And I eventually got a really good depth and it looks absolutely flush. Even though I didn't sand it down to the tabletop, it just looks super flush. Securing the tabletop to the base was always kind of a question for me. I wasn't quite sure what method would be the best until I decided at the very end to use Z-clips. I did a bit of research and they seemed really secure, and I just used a biscuit joiner to cut the inset for the Z-clips, and I ran them all on the inside so that you can't really see them unless you're really looking for it. Final step is just applying the ceramic coating. This stuff's super easy to apply, adds another layer of protection and waterproof. And the easiest part is I can just rub it over the whole thing, not having to worry about rubbing off the black onto the inlay. It dries in about an hour, so you can apply 3 or 4 coats in one evening or one day, and then wait a couple days for it to dry. And that is it, all finished. The client was really happy with this. They thought it was beautiful, it matched their house. They've got a lot of black trimming in their living room, so that worked perfectly. Now let me know what you think about it, if you like the natural timber look or the black timber look. If you have any questions, happy to talk about it.